The second two-night Democratic debate is almost here, and CNN has announced the lineups. Night 1 will feature Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, the most progressive of the 4 top polling candidates, facing off with Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, Amy Klobuchar, Hickenlooper, Ryan, Delaney, Williamson, and Bullock. Night 2 sets the stage for a repeat of the most dramatic moment of the first Democratic debate, headlined by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
They're joined by Cory Booker, Andrew Yang, Julian Castro, Tulsi Gabbard, Gillibrand, Inslee, Bennet and De Blasio. In this video, I'm going to give you my sense of who benefited by this particular lineup and who didn't. I'm also going to give you my predictions of what you're likely to see on each night, and answer the question, who will win? Okay, so let's start with night 1. Given that most of the more aggressive debaters, Kamala Harris, Tulsi Gabbard, Bill de Blasio, and Julian Castro, are all set to appear on night 2, night 1 is likely to be somewhat less eventful. Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, and Amy Klobuchar all have definitively more passive approaches to debate, given what we saw in their appearances in June. Sanders and Warren also, despite what you may see hyped up in the mainstream media leading up to the event, are not likely to attack one another. The two are close friends, and Bernie would likely consider Warren as a potential running mate were he to secure the nomination. We will likely be treated to an array of attacks, however, against Bernie Sanders from some of the smaller candidates sharing the stage, many of whom have defined themselves in opposition to the more progressive agenda Democrats have begun embracing since Bernie's 2016 run. Hickenlooper, Delaney, and Ryan will almost certainly use their time to go after Bernie directly, while Klobuchar will likely take a less confrontational approach for the same moderate messaging. For all of these smaller candidates, getting an opportunity to take on Bernie is exactly what they should have been hoping for, so their placement in night 1 was a win for their campaigns. As for Bernie himself, his placement alongside Elizabeth Warren, passive mid-level contenders, and aggressive minor candidates isn't necessarily such a bad thing for his campaign. While some Bernie fans might have hoped to see him face off against Biden, if that first debate proved anything, it's that Bernie is sticking with his non-aggressive approach to his campaign. As I've been telling you guys, Bernie rarely attacks Democrats with any kind of fire. Picking a fight with Joe Biden would be out of character, and it wouldn't necessarily cast him in the best light, as Biden is also looking to avoid conflict. Bernie does, however, fight hard when he's put on the defensive, particularly in regards to his policy positions. With a host of small, more conservative candidates coming after him, he'll likely have the opportunity to demonstrate his debate chops to voters. Bullock, having failed to qualify for the first round of debates, remains a bit of a mystery in style and in substance. While he has earned praise from Washington insiders like Donna Brazile and Neera Tanden, he also seems to have a history of railing against money in politics. I expect he'll be running as a Harris-Gillibrand style candidate, a progressive the DNC can get behind. That doesn't mean the grassroots progressive movement will necessarily embrace him, but it does mean he's unlikely to make a point of taking on Bernie Sanders. To be honest, I don't know enough about Bullock to tell you whether his placement in night 1 will benefit him or not. But as the only candidate to enter the debate stage for the first time on the second round, he's definitely the wild card to watch. Swalwell's passed him the torch. Let's see if he lights up the stage or burns down his campaign. For Marianne Williamson, the first debate was almost universally recognized as a missed opportunity. She spent a lot of time going after the idea of just having plans, which appeared to be a slight against Elizabeth Warren.
Donald Trump is not going to be beaten just by insider politics talk. He's not going to be beaten just by somebody who has plans.
So sharing the stage with her now is probably a win for her. Her chances of actually knocking Warren down a peg or two, however, are kind of remote. Elizabeth Warren was, in my view, the biggest beneficiary of the first debate lineup, as it gave her the opportunity to own night 1 without serious attention being taken away by other top polling candidates. For this debate, things have certainly changed. Given that by design she had to be paired with one other member of the top 4, Warren got the worst selection possible. Paired with Harris, Warren might have been able to distinguish herself as the real progressive and take some energy away from the latter surging candidate. Having already attacked Biden before, sharing the stage with him would have given her the opportunity to decimate him on a variety of subjects. As it stands, she's stuck between a rock and a hard place. She could either alienate her progressive following by attacking her friend Bernie Sanders, who she already failed to support in 2016. To do so, she would likely have to take up arguments that sound centrist, as he is definitively more progressive than she is. Another option would be to go on the attack against smallest centrist candidates, who would likely be more focused on attacking Bernie Sanders, making her look somewhat insignificant. Or she could take a more passive stance, which would not help her in the polls either. Her most likely route to success will be to take on Beto or Pete on policy issues. Both these candidates have had some issues with articulating clear policy positions, while she has built her name on having plans.
It's really nice if we got all these plans, but if you think we're going to beat Donald Trump by just having all these plans, you got another thing coming.
Beto will be a particularly soft target, as he was schooled pretty decisively by Julian Castro in one of his strongest policy areas, the border and immigration.
The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not.
While the lineup may not be ideal for Warren, if she executes this strategy, she will likely pull out a win. That, of course, puts Pete and particularly Beto in a vulnerable position. Appearing on stage with Biden and Harris would likely have given them the opportunity to shine in the way that they want to, with grand speeches about hope and working together. If the first debate proved anything, it's that Beto is not very good at this. He was likely toast either way. If he has to square off against Warren, it could end his campaign. For Pete Buttigieg, night 2 might have been an easier path to victory, but I don't expect to see him flop this time around. In the first debate, I counted him as a loser, but only because the discussion around the problems in South Bend was pretty much a no-win situation for him.
Because I couldn't get it done. My community is in anguish right now.
That's unlikely to be a subject of conversation again, and Pete has always done well in front of a crowd. Aside from the South Bend section of that debate, Pete had a near flawless performance, and I expect him to repeat that.
And if you look at what China is doing, they're using technology for the perfection of dictatorship.
Even if challenged by Warren on policy, Pete may not have all the answers, but he's good at navigating the ambiguity. When challenged to support a specific proposal, Pete has a tendency to add details and nuance. So rather than committing himself to something he'll have to walk back later, or rejecting a proposal that is too progressive for his tastes out of hand, he ends up coming off as thoughtful and open-minded. That's something that I think makes him pretty likable for most mainstream Democrats, and short of an extended discussion on his personal failures as a mayor, I think he'll escape this debate in a stronger position than he entered it. At the end of the night, I expect Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and wildcard Steve Bullock to be the most likely to be talked about as winners of the debate. The others are likely to fade to the background or be the recipient of a serious walloping. Marianne Williamson will likely make me laugh and feel bad for her at the same time, bless her heart.
So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I'm going to harness love for political purposes.
But the biggest moments are likely to emerge from night 2. I very much expect night 2 to be a bloodbath. While for most of their nights in the first round of debates, Yang, Gabbard, and Inslee were generally underwhelming, all three of these candidates are capable of more energy, which I very much hope to see.
China, we need to cooperate with them on climate change, AI, and other issues. North Korea.
De Blasio, Castro, and to some extent Bennet are all proven fighters, as is of course Kamala Harris. With so many aggressive candidates packed onto one stage, one thing seems surer than anything else. Joe Biden is about to take another serious hit. As the frontrunner in this race, as of the time of this recording at least, Joe Biden's main strategy has been, and probably ought to be, to avoid conflict and direct confrontations. His goal is to remain on top, and the more passive the contest is, the less likely the apple cart is to be turned over. Facing off against this cast of candidates, it is highly unlikely that Biden will avoid taking damage. The only upside to this placement for Joe is that he avoids a direct confrontation with Elizabeth Warren. That should be little comfort to Biden, as literally everyone on stage is a potential threat. Bennet attacked him in the last debate. Gillibrand is the most likely to criticize him over his treatment of women. Castro is a genuinely aggressive candidate. Booker has criticized him in the past over race issues. Harris, as we know, delivered a knockout punch last time. Yang's highly modern approach to policy is the antithesis of his old school approach. Gabbard is likely to attack him on his votes for conflict in the Middle East. Inslee could attack him on being weak on environmental issues. And De Blasio at least campaigns as an aggressive progressive. This is DEFCON 4 for the Biden campaign. But a more aggressive confrontational tone isn't just bad news for Joe Biden. Andrew Yang is about as calm and policy-focused as it gets. An impassioned debate is the last thing he needs. And given his unremarkable performance last time around, and the rare moments where his microphone was on, this debate could really pump the brakes on his campaign if it gets heated. Cory Booker doesn't exactly lack passion, but he's also not much of a fighter. In a more aggressive battle, I would expect him to fail to stand out. Plus, his mixed record when it comes to Big Pharma could be called out by one candidate who stands to gain from a bit of conflict and controversy. Despite having an overall passive showing in the first round of debates, Gabbard managed to pull out a serious W when she went on the attack against Tim Ryan.
When we weren't in there, they started flying planes into our buildings. So I'm just saying right now,
the Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. Al-Qaeda did.
She's unlikely to miss the lesson, and as a result, I expect her to look for opportunities to call out other candidates in this debate. As the most definitively progressive candidate on the stage, with the potential exception of Yang depending on exactly how you define that, Tulsi has no shortage of opponents to take on. Expect her to shine during the foreign policy discussions. Also expect the moderators to ask her some especially tough questions. I kind of get the sense the mainstream press is no fan of hers.
One of the first things you did after launching your campaign was to issue an apology to the LGBTQ community about your past stances and statements on gay rights. Why should voters in that community, or voters that care about this issue in general, trust you now?
While not nearly as progressive when it comes to actually governing, Bill de Blasio is also likely to go on the attack from a progressive perspective.
Yes, we're supposed to be for a 70% tax rate on the wealthy. Yes, we're supposed to be for free college, free public college for our young people. We are supposed to break up big corporations when they're not serving our democracy. This Democratic Party has to be strong and bold and progressive.
Despite being among the least popular candidates to make the debate, the big man proved to have a serious talent when it comes to getting his voice heard, and is likely to draw more talking time than a bottom-tier candidate probably should. His height also gives him an extra advantage on stage, as anyone unlucky enough to be in a skirmish with him will look small and weak in comparison. Poor Beto. Julian Castro will also be a dangerous presence on stage. He has a strong authoritative voice, reminiscent of that of Barack Obama, and he's effective at projecting a sense of policy knowledge, particularly when it comes to his central campaign focus, immigration. As for Gillibrand, she was not blessed with Castro's voice or de Blasio's height, nor his ability to effectively grab the spotlight, despite frequent attempts to do so at the first debate.
Both their perspectives.
Thank you, Senator.
And can I just address this for a second? And I want to talk directly to America's women.
I don't know if she will continue her somewhat disruptive approach this time around, but I can't say I expect much from her. Based purely on platform and what she has to say, Gillibrand is one of the more progressive contenders in the race, despite her origins as a right-wing blue dog Democrat. She's also one of the most accomplished as a U.S. Senator. Her resume would seem to make her deserving of a middle to top tier ranking amongst the candidates, but without the charisma of Kamala Harris or the boldness of Tulsi Gabbard, she was never likely to make much of an impression, which is part of the reason why I listed her in my 10 Democrats who shouldn't run video. She's also a former Clintonite. Having alienated both the donor class and progressive, Gillibrand has little chance of gaining much momentum outside of the debates, and with little discernible talent for gaining the spotlight within them, this debate may signal the end of her campaign, unless she somehow manages to pull a rabbit out of her hat. Bennet is also unlikely to make his mark on the debate stage. I found him surprisingly effective in the first debate, but he still didn't manage to pick up steam. With so many talented debaters sharing the stage, it's unlikely he'll be able to create a moment, and without that, he's likely to get lost in the shuffle. This could be his last debate. Finally, let's talk about Kamala Harris, the undisputed champion of Debate 1. As everyone knows, Kamala propelled herself among the top polling candidates after her aggressive attacks on Joe Biden. But she didn't just create a moment. She had a strong performance the whole night through, with well-performed canned lines like the food fight line.
America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Yes.
While her new top-tier status may make her tend slightly away from a particularly aggressive approach this time around, Harris is a prosecutor, through and through. At the very least, you'll see a consistent, strong, poised performance from Harris. At best, she'll come after Biden with another knockout punch in an attempt to secure herself the status of frontrunner. Standing right next to Joe Biden is the best lineup position she could have hoped for. And while she is by no means my favorite candidate in the field, I do consider her to be the best debater. So she would likely be a winner no matter who she goes up against. So among the Night 2 candidates, I consider Kamala Harris, Tulsi Gabbard, Julian Castro, and Bill de Blasio to be the most likely to be regarded as winners of the debate, with the others likely to perform somewhat unremarkably. These 8 then are, in my view, the most likely to deliver a winning performance during the 2-night Democratic debate, but that's just my opinion. Let me know your opinion in the comments section. What do you think? Who will win?